At Morning Show, we're not beyond gloating, except we like gloating. And the ANC has lost yet another battle. First was cadre deployment, now it's BEE. And with me to talk about this is Ramon. Hello, Ramon. What do you think? Another battle won.
Thanks to Zakali, there is no more black economic empowerment when it comes to tenders. And this is actually like huge, huge news, even though no one seems to really care about it. So, back in the day, in 2017, Praveen Gordhan, that absolute commie bastard, put forth some regulations about procurement, right? And BEE was like the main thing. If you weren't 100% BEE compliant, you couldn't even put a tender through, right? Now, after Sakalicha's constitutional court case victory, that had to fall away. And over the weekend, new regulations were meted out, which basically makes no mention of BEE for procurement services, which is massive.
So obviously, last week I interviewed Russell Lambati of Sakalicha, and he went through a lot of the BE stuff with me. The key thing to recognize is that in 2017, what occurred was that Praveen Gordhan basically said that you were automatically disqualified if you were not 100% BEE owned business. So basically what we call a level 1 business. The rationality behind this is that Eskom wanted to be the driving force behind transformation within the country. Now, at the time, this was mooted as a potential threat to the survival of Eskom because it said if there were no businesses that were able to hit the 100% threshold, how did they get the services provided? And the answer was, well, they couldn't, because even if they didn't have 100% business, let's say they only had 80% BEE, they would automatically be disqualified. Now, this went to the Constitutional Court, which ruled that this was invalid. And in typical fashion, the commie bastards did what the commie bastards do, and they said, right, well, as we have this rule and we've been told not to use it, we're just not going to tender for anything. And they put a moratorium on all spending within those sectors until the regulations were ironed out. Now, if you recall, during the ANC conference, Cyril Ramaphosa, yet once again, him and all the rest of his commie bastards, said that they would be very much in favor of reinstituting these type of rules. The problem is now Eskom's new board, which was supposed to be a board full of commie bastards that were all part of the BEE in crowd, they were all supposed to come in and tell the president, yeah, you were right with your BEE rules, except they didn't. Problem is, they actually came in and said, well, we've actually looked at the place. It's a giant shit show. And as a result, if we continue to do these things, Eskom's going to die even quicker than it already is. And so quietly, the Minister for Finance, Mr. Gordhan Gwana, if I've said that correctly, and if I haven't, I'm very sorry for butchering your name. It's foreign to me, So he came through and he quietly pushed through some no more BEE rules. Now, I want to be clear. It doesn't say that BEE is gone. What it says is that the 100% BEE rule is no longer applicable. So if you don't hit the 100% threshold, that's fine, because it only waits for between 10 and 20% of the tender score. So if you are 100%, you can get 10 or 20, but now if you have a lower score, it will still pound for some points, but it doesn't automatically disqualify you. Now, this is meant to obviously capture the rules that if there is no BE supplier who can provide the services, then at least the services don't just cease to be. Now, the key thing, Ramon, here, and it's something for you, I suppose you can comment on, is that we've now seen two regulations come out. And those two regulations, the first were the dropping of cadre deployments, which we obviously did a segment on. And now the second is this one, which is around the BE rules being basically descaled in terms of merit. And this does seem to be a return to meritocracy, both with the cadre deployment rules and the BE rules being abolished. The two very things that many economists are saying, if we get rid of those, the South African economy will grow. Where is the mainstream media? We asked this around cadre deployments, and we can now ask it again. Isn't it strange that the mainstream media, which this should be front page news, is silent on everything?
Well, we know why. It's because a ostensibly white organization made this happen. They agree with every single aspect of the regime. They stand with the regime in terms of every single racial discriminatory legislation that is on paper. So if those things disappear from the laws, they're not going to crow about it. They actually want them in place Because we know why South Africa is poor, Byron. It's because of the white person, right? It's because of Jan van Riebeeck. It's because of apartheid. It's because of this. It's because of that. The ANC can't do no harm. Some of them are a bit corrupt, of course, but to Adrian Basson, still, the best way for South Africa to move forward is to just parrot what we've been doing for the past 30 years, whereas civil society has taken a very careful approach. And Sakaliga, once again, they've taken a scalpel step by step to the biggest purveyors of patronage for the ANC, which was cater deployment. Well, the DA was responsible for that. And Asakaliha, with this BE preferential procurement framework, they've taken away the two biggest power, what can I say, givers to the ANC, which will just accelerate the demise of the ANC to an extent that an election won't. Like, this is massive news. And once again, no one's talking about it.
So more on this, but first, a word from our sponsor, Bitwise.
Let's be honest, Bitcoin is by far the best performing asset of the last decade, and a lot of people are using Bitcoin to hedge themselves against government overreach and fiat currency debasement, otherwise known as inflation. And that's why the guys over at Bitwise have developed their latest product, Sat Stacker. Essentially, you set a debit order, you accumulate Bitcoin every single month. Your Bitcoin won't be on an exchange, it won't be in anyone's hands, it will be directly deposited into your private wallet. So accumulate Bitcoin today, and every single month you set the price, you set the frequency, Sat Stacker does all the rest. In order to get started, click the link in the description below. But interestingly, Byron, now that these regulations have been promulgated, municipalities across the nation, SOEs, all sorts of things, no longer have to use BE as a requirement for tenderpreneurship. Now they can actually give it based on merit and give it based on price and a variety of other things. So who do you think is going to start by not incorporating this into their tender processes? I mean, one hopes that the city of Cape Town might be the first one to do it, or like the DA who's in control of, I don't know, Midvaal or Nelson Mandela Bay or things like that might want to do it as well. But what are your thoughts here? Do you think anything is actually going to fundamentally change now that the regulation has actually changed?
I don't think so. I think that the irregular practices are still going to occur. I think that if they're actually able to force it, the whole point of what I was just explaining to you is who's going to fund the ANC, and we already know the ANC is bankrupt. Their patronage network, usually the way it works is on a kickback system. If you give me a tender for, say, a mil, I give you, Mr. ANC, a 20% kickback because you got me that tender. Or the job for cronies thing. If they get a mil a year, they sacrifice 30% to the ANC. This is how the ANC gets a lot of their money back within the organization as donations. So if you can't award those jobs or those tenders anymore, then there's no feedback loop, there's no tender loop. So how is the ANC going to survive? And you can't tell me that that's lost beyond them, which means that whilst the regulations may change, I very much doubt that the practices will, because without the practices, there's no one to fund the ANC, mate. How else are they going to do it? Party membership? I mean, party membership ain't looking that great. No one really wants to be a member of the ANC anymore. And because of the funding regulations where you have to declare all funding over 100,000, makes it very difficult for large donors to actually donate money there anymore on a covert basis without their interest being declared. So I can't see that they're going to change their practices. Even if the law changes, I think the practices will continue.
Yeah, I agree. It's weird. Even though if you do covertly try to fund the ANC through like cash dollars, like, they just keep it under their couch and it gets stolen by other people. So even covert funding of the ANC is just not working out. But if we just go to Sakaliga very quickly, they do say that they do understand that many organs of state and municipalities will not automatically take up their constitutional duty to recover their procurement independence. They will still abdicate that responsibility to the national executive, i.e., in other words, municipalities and SOEs are just a bunch of beta cucks for the regime. So, in essence, it's up to people like you and I, Byron, it's up to business owners all over the place to take on this responsibility, this independence, and make it very, very difficult for people to use race as a proxy for procurement policies in the future. So, unfortunately, when you have a void in state, that void needs to be filled by people outside the state, i.e., private businesses like the ones we run.
Yeah, and this was something that Russell went to great lengths to explain during my interview with him from Sakaliga. He did say at some point in time, private businesses just need to say no. And when it does say no, you need to know what the regulations say in the strict interpretations. And so, as he says, it's everyone's imperative and everyone's job to basically know the regulations inside out. and follow the least amount of them that you can. Don't go for the top ranking, just go for the very least to be legally compliant and just say to hell with the rest of it. And as he says, it's now an imperative for every citizen of the state to do that.
Yeah, I cannot actually agree more. So, once again, thank you, Sarkaliha. Thank you, civil society, for removing the worst excesses of communism from our political system and our economic system. I'm sure South Africa would be a much poorer place without the likes of Sarkaliha around. So, we owe them a huge debt. I'm going to actually leave a link to their website at the bottom here. If you are willing, I would recommend becoming a member. You help fund these sort of constitutional court challenges that actually makes life in South Africa a lot better, especially as a business owner. So I would highly recommend that.